Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub, and if you're a frequent viewer of L'Chaim, you know that I often have the chance to introduce you to some of the most remarkable, wonderful people in the Jewish world, from every facet of Jewish life, from every sector of Jewish life, of various political, social, Jewish perspectives. Many of them are people I know, and for whom I have profound regard and affection. But there are also people in the Jewish world and on the world scene in general whom I don't know. But as you, I've only had the chance to see them from afar. And as many of you, I have the experience of marveling at their wisdom, their insight, their values, and their ability to articulate the truths of life in a way that both opens our eyes to better see the world in which we live and inspire us to want to be better human beings, to be better in our aspirations and our accomplishments, to be better in our relationships with others. They are the superstars of our times. And for me, they are people I hope that one day I have the chance to meet, to probe their minds and understanding, and to simply sit with them at this table on L'Chaim, and to give you the chance to meet them, to get to know them with me as well. On this edition of L'Chaim, I have that very honor and privilege to be sitting with a man I have so very much wanted to meet for years and years, from the first time I heard him speak more than a decade ago at a General Assembly in Los Angeles, California, in conversation with Fareed Zakaria about the world of Islam, which has been a major focus of his attention. And I was mesmerized. Since then, I've gone out of my way to hear him any time I possibly can, to bring him on JBS whenever I possibly can. And I've always learned from him and been inspired by him. And it is my great pleasure now to welcome to L'Chaim Bernard-Henri Lévy, a contemporary Renaissance man, the preeminent French philosopher of our time, a leading intellectual on the world stage, the author of more than 30 books, including Who Killed Daniel Pearl, and a fabulous, renowned journalist who's been our eyes and ears and heart at some of the most painful, socially momentous events of our time, from Bangladesh and Darfur to Afghanistan, Pakistan, Libya, Iraq, and Israel during the 2006 war with Lebanon. And he's also a filmmaker, a playwright, and a columnist who writes for the Huffington Post. And that's just the highlights of Bernard-Henri's remarkable career and contribution. And on top of that, Bernard-Henri Lévy is a passionate Jew who has written an amazing, wonderful book entitled The Genius of Judaism, which takes the reader on a marvelous journey, not only of the author, and there's much we learn about Bernard-Henri in this book, but also a journey into the soul of the Jewish tradition as he reflects on both the unique values that have shaped the social conscience of the Jewish people, as well as the unique history of the Jewish people, beginning with the ways in which the plague of anti-Semitism, historical and contemporary, have influenced and continue to influence Jewish life and Jewish experience and Jewish identity. And Bernard-Henri Lévy's Genius of Judaism is also a poetic book, a romantic book, filled with beautiful references to classical midrash, paying homage to Rashi, and all the commentators who follow in the tradition of delving into the text to learn its deeper, eternal truth. from struggling with the concept of being the chosen people to searching for what it means to be in relationship with the divine in this universe, the God whom the Jewish tradition knows and wants us to know in a very unique and revelatory way. All this is in Bernard-Henri Lévy's compelling, delicious book, The Genius of Judaism. It is so kind of you to make time. I know what this trip for you to America and New York is like. That you've made time for us is so kind of you. And for me, this is an enormous kick and joy to be sitting with you at this table. Thank you, Bernard, for being here.
No, thank you, Mark. Thank you to have invited me and to say these so sweet words about this book, which is so crucially important for me. And what you said was so right in the point that I'm really, really moved and happy.
Thank you. You make me very happy. So look, you understand. I told you before we began, I could keep you here for an entire day and week. We have one l'chaim to talk. There's so much in this delicious book. So I tried to say to myself, look, you've only got a few moments. What are the key issues? You write in this book that it's not till the age of 30 that you realize, you become acquainted with, you meet Torah and Talmud. And that you then say that you might never have continued writing were it not for what you learned in Torah and Talmud. So I want to take a step back for one moment. Who are you? What kind of Jewish home? I know you're born in Algeria. You grow up in Paris. You have parents who do very well. Your father does very well. But what's the Jewish home? What's your Jewish experience, Bernard, as you're growing up in France?
My home was very little Jewish.
Little?
Yeah. My father was a great man who had been involved in the international brigades in Spain, who had been a hero during the Second World War and the French Free Army. And he went out of the war certainly with the conviction that Judaism was, of course, a source of pride, but also a source of suffering and malediction. And as many Jews in Europe at this time, he had probably the idea to protect his children from this source of pride and of malediction. And I was grown in a very paradoxical way. In a sense, in the consciousness of my Judaism, I was taught when I was a boy that if at school there was an anti-Semitic remark, I had to box and to fight, and my father sent me to sport place to learn how to fight, which I still know till today. It's sometimes useful. But on the other side, nothing of the positive wealth of Judaism, nothing about Torah, even less about Talmud. I did not even know the existence of these treasures of thought. So the idea that I was Jewish and no idea of what it really meant and of what was the content of it. This was the landscape till I was a grown-up man.
Okay. By the way, children. You have siblings?
Brother and sister.
You have a brother and a sister.
Yeah.
They experienced the same?
Same.
Okay. Did you have a bar mitzvah ceremony?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah.
Do you remember it?
Yeah.
What did you do?
It was a very, how would I say, a very light and minimal ceremony.
Did it have any meaning to you at the time?
It has nearly no meaning. And it may sound strange to say that, but I think around me I had a lot of Christian boys who went there, what they call like the communion. And there was a sort of conflict. I wanted to be like them, And of course, I could not make, because my parents were never, again, they were proud of their Judaism. So there was no question of converting, changing name, or whatever. But probably in order to allow me to be like the others, they asked for a very light ceremony of bar mitzvah, which I think was okay in terms of rituals.
Sure.
But of which I have, frankly, no memorable...
Interesting. Incidentally, I don't want to discuss this now because there's too much other to discuss, but I will make a reference. You begin the Genius of Judaism with a discussion of anti-Semitism. I was surprised. I thought you would talk about the issues that you deal with in part 2 first, and then get to anti-Semitism. You made a conscious decision to begin with anti-Semitism, and you write about it magnificently. As you're growing up as a child, as this Jewish kid with a strong sense of Jewish identity from your parents, but at the same time, it's not a living presence, was there anti-Semitism in your life that you had to deal with as a child?
Yes, of course. Not so much, but as for any European boy, maybe American, I don't know, but there is one experience, at least, which is burning all your life. And I had one. I remember I was maybe 10 or 11 years old. It was the day before Christmas, the day of the departure for holidays. All the boys of the class were talking about their holidays, which were beginning, and about the gifts which they were about to receive for Christmas. And I said, my gift is, I don't know what, blah. And suddenly, one of my best friends, we were so close, we were brothers, came to me and said, hey, how can you say that? You cannot receive a gift for Christmas. I had no idea. I said, why? He said, because you are Jew. Jew cannot celebrate Christmas and even less receive gifts. And it is, I said that it is burning till today because it was really as the sky falling on your head. Little boy, maybe even 10 years old, I was very small, learning at the same time that he has no right to receive a gift, no right to celebrate Christmas, and this because he is different, and because this difference is a negative one, it is a disaster. Mm-hmm. And so I had not the time to dry my tears until I arrived home, and I asked my mother, what does it mean? This is what happened. And they explained me.
What did they say?
They said that there was a plague in France, an epidemic, a plague, which could never be cured, which was running everywhere, which was anti-Semitism. There was the cancer, there was the flu, and there was in the middle anti-Semitism, which was a sort of plague. And they told me that there was some antivirus against that there was some sort of antibiotics, source of life, fighting this plague, and they taught me which one. First one was to go in sport halls to learn how to box, as I told you before. Second one was to have articulated replies. So I was taught all that in a few hours.
Amazing. You do understand that, as you say, it happens to almost every Jew at some point or another. I'm not sure it happens as dramatically in America. And I don't want to get into my own moment, but your story evokes a moment in my life. And what you said was what I experienced. It came out of nowhere. When it happened to me from a friend, it never occurred to me that I would ever hear that type of thing. And my sense is, one of the things that made it so painful for you was, this was from a friend from whom you would never expect to hear it, yes?
No, what made it so hurtful, what hurt me
Painful?
so much, is not only that it was a friend, it is that I was disarmed. I had no weapons to reply. And that is one of the theses of Genius of Judaism. One of the reply to the anti-Semitism is to have weapons, to be armed. not to be like this. I was so vulnerable. And you are vulnerable when you don't know what it is to be a Jew. When you live your Judaism only as a sort of a negative affect, a negative quality, when you know of what it is plenty, of what Judaism is rich, why Judaism is a pride, then you have arguments to reply. Then you can look at your enemy in the eyes, and he will put the eyes on the ground, not you.
Good for you.
So the real source of suffering was that I was unable, probably on this ground, to look at him in the eyes and to compel him to look on the ground. Mm-hmm. Today, and since a long time now, if I meet again the little boy of Lycée Pasteur of Neuilly, and if he told me again something like that, he will probably lower the eyes, not me.
Okay, come back to you're 30 years old, and you find Torah and Talmud. How?
As always, through a master, through a few masters. To be completely honest, through two masters. One was called Manitou in France. He was a huge master without a real written work, but a great moral and eloquent authority. And more important than that, Emmanuel Levinas.
Yes.
Who is probably one of the biggest Jewish thinkers of the 20th century.
Absolutely.
Who is the inheritor of Franz Rosenzweig, who is in the great tradition of the masters of Talmud, who was also a philosopher, a traditional philosopher. He did hold the two keys. He knew Husserl and Plato and Heidegger, and he knew Rabbi Akiba, Maharal of Prague, and Gaon of Vilnius. He knew the two, and he was able to put them in mirror of each other. He was able to enrich the philosophy of the Logos with the saint writings, and he was able to enrich the saint writing with the profane philosophy. And this, for me, was a miracle. Mm-hmm. This was a lesson of thought which impressed me decisively, which took me out of the dead end where I was in terms of thought after my first book. I was in a sort of, that's why I say here that I would certainly have stopped my work of writer and intellectual if I had not met the positivity of Judaism. This is because of Levinas, because Levinas was the perfect matching between my culture of this time and the culture for which I longed, mm-hmm. I was longing for. Mm-hmm. It was the two. So Levinas was a great encounter. I admired him a lot. I think he had a little affection for me. He paid homage to my first Jewish book, published in 1979, called The Testament of God.
About Israel?
About Israel. No, not only about, already without the Hebrew, but already about the Torah. And he made an article which I have never forgotten, which was for me a sort of blessing. So this was the main encounter, and then began the long path in which I engaged till today.
Interesting. Whatever you did learn and whatever you came in contact with really spoke to your soul, yes?
To my soul, which is to my heart and to my intelligence,
mm-hmm.
to both.
Mm-hmm.
My soul means the two, yes. When I read the book of Yonah, when I read the commentaries of the Malbim or Sforno, and when I try to when I try to put a drop, like a drop of ink, a drop of commentary upon that, who speaks? My brain mm-hmm. and my heart.
Okay.
Both.
Can you describe how you are different now as a Jew from what you were when you were 25? And that may not be the right age to ask you. No, I want to ask you when you're 18. The reason 18 is, one other thing we're going to talk about in a moment, is another formative event in your life which you address in the Genius of Judaism. When you were about 19, you go to Israel for the first time during the Six-Day War. That has a profound impact on you. I want to go, before you go to Israel, before your first trip to Israel, you are a bright, sophisticated teenager, and you have not seen Israel yet, and you have no real sense of Torah and the rabbinic traditions, which what you mean by Talmud. What's the difference between Bernard-Henri Lévy at 18 as a Jew, and as we sit now together, who you are as a Jew today?
The difference is that now, when I go to Israel, I know why. When I was 18, I did not only go to Israel, I enlisted myself during the War of the 6 Days in order to defend. I enlisted myself in Tzahal in order to defend Israel. The war finished very soon, so I had not to commit myself. But I did the gesture. This gesture, I did it many times in my life, in a way. Not in Tzahal, but as you said, in 2006, I covered the war in Lebanon. I was inside Gaza, embedded with an Israeli unit during the second war.
In 2014.
In Gaza. I made a report already in 1981 about the first Lebanon war, and so on. So I did that all my life.
Yeah.
All my life, when Israel was in danger, I tried to do my best in order to be there, in order to do what I could to help. The difference is that when I was 18, doing that was, for me, on my own eyes, a complete mystery. I was compelled to do that. A force inside me pushed me to go to the Israeli consulate in Paris and to try to enlist myself, but with no idea of why I did that. Today...
But then why did you?
Why?
You didn't know why.
No, I didn't know
But
why.
you needed to do it.
I needed to do it.
Why?
I don't know. Because...
No, you have a reason.
Yes, because I was already a Jew. Without knowledge, without self-conscience, without nothing, but already a Jew.
Oh,
because I had the slight, the remote remembrance of my grandfathers, of my grandfathers, and so on. There was already in my head what I recount in the epilogue of this book, this fight of these voices of my grandfathers, my father, one Orthodox Jew, one secular Jew, and so on. They were already like birds in a cage, fighting in the cage of my brain, probably when I was 18. But it was just a meaningless sound and noise at this time. Today, it has a meaning. It is the last pages of the book.
That is wonderful. Okay, we're going to come back to the Genius of Judaism and this issue about God. We'll come back to that in a minute. I want to stay on Israel for a second. We've already talked about the fact that you go to Israel the first time during the Six-Day War, and you do say you want to serve, but by the time you get there, the war is over. But you stay and you do still contribute to Israeli society at that time. You write now, it is so tiresome to have to defend Israel. A fabulous line. What a line, Bernard. It is tiresome to have to defend Israel. And then you write, it is so depressing to have to present the same evidence over and over. Now, I want to tell you why this passage took me, stunned me. You are known as, look, without in any way embarrassing you, you are one of the leading intellectual voices in the world today. You are associated with liberal causes. Your journalistic work has taken you to horrific scenes because of the passion you have for justice that you believe every human being is entitled to. You are a profoundly committed liberal, progressive Jew. Right now, we're living in a time when the liberal community seems to be further and further distanced from a pro-Israel position. And your chapter on Israel is called Exceptional Israel. I want to understand from your perspective, how do you view you and how you can, at the one hand, be, you lean to the left, you're a liberal, you embrace many of the most profound liberal concepts, and yet, while other liberal voices are constantly making you defend Israel, how is it that you have been able to make a distinction in your mind when it comes to Israel, as opposed to a range of other liberal voices, liberal issues, which do attract you and which you do want to champion? And what do you say to yourself about your connection to the liberal community when so much of the liberal community sees Israel as the problem?
It is their problem. It is the problem is not Israel. The problem is them. If they are not able to understand that the values for which they fight, they are embodied more than sometimes anywhere else, at least in the area for sure, but even beyond the area, in Israel, I'm sorry for them, but they are blind. If they are not able to understand that the country where the Arab people is the most free, has a right to read the press he wants, has a right to demonstrate even in times of war, has the right to plead for its rights of minority whenever he wants, that this country is Israel, okay, poor them. I know the rest of the area. I went a lot in Libya. I am just back from Iraq a few days ago, just before coming in New York. I know all these places, and I know that if I am a consistent liberal, if I really believe in the freedom of spirit, in the freedom of ethics, if I really believe in the freedom of speech, Israel is frankly, there is no model, of course, because no country is perfect, but is a rather well-articulated embodiment of these values. This is a fact. And Zionism, when I was 18, I was not only a leftist, which I still am, but I was a revolutionary. And I was a friend of all the movements of national liberation, which were going through the third world at this time. And I probably already felt that one of the liberation movement who was succeeding the best was the Zionism. It is a national liberation movement. It was an anti-imperialist movement fighting against the empire of this time, which was the British Empire at the end of the 40s. So it was the liberation movement which succeeded. And after that, 10 years, 20 years after, anyone had to admit that Israel was, alas, the fruit of the only liberation movement which did not turn into its opposite and which did not turn into a dictatorship. But this appeared to me when I was a teenager. I felt it, even if I did not say it this way. But what I want to say is that my Zionism, my friendship to Zionism, was absolutely running on the same legs as my friendship with all liberation movements at this time. I read Frantz Fanon, who was one of the biggest spokesmen of the liberation of the African people and enslaved by imperialism and so on. Frantz Fanon was one of my heroes, but Ben Gurion was another hero. And for me, Ben Gurion and Frantz Fanon were two voices expressing and fighting for the same anti-imperialist liberation, except that Ben Gurion succeeded, and Frantz Fanon or his followers, alas, did not succeed till today. Mm-hmm. So the problem of consistency has never been for me. It is for those who, for example, don't demonstrate, don't go in the streets of Paris or of everywhere when you have 400,000 Arabs in Syria killed by an Arab dictator. They don't move. They keep on their chair and they go in the street and they shout very strongly when there is not 400,000 but 2,000 Arabs who are killed because of a Jewish army. So this double standard, to be concerned when Israel is involved and to wash your hands, not to care when when only Arabs are concerned, this is a double standard. This is an absence of consistency, and this is a problem of those liberals you are speaking of.
That's so beautifully said. I told you this is a courageous book. That's a courageous stand for someone like you to take. Incidentally, has your position cost you friends?
Yes.
It has.
Of course. Of course. On and on. Yeah. Yes, yes. The only fact, for example, I told you that I made a story about that in French newspapers, and maybe it was published here. When I was in Gaza, I did what I did all my life, which is to try to see with my own eyes what is happening on the ground. I made a lot of war reports. I did it in Iraq, I did it in Libya, I did it with forgotten wars in Africa, and I wanted to do it in Gaza. So I did what I do generally, which is to go on the front line with the only one who are able to go, which is a unit of soldiers. When I do that on Darfur, when I do that in Angola, when I do that in Burundi, no problem. Bravo, Bernard-Henri Lévy. When I did that in Gaza, suddenly it became a scandal in France. And of course, it did cost me a few friends. Because, again, a friend who tells me, I understand when you embed yourself in a unit of soldiers of Rwanda, but with a unit of Salah, I don't understand, they cannot be my friends any longer. I don't put friendship above morality. I cannot. Friendship is very important, of course, but beliefs, creeds, battle for truth is probably more important. At least it cannot go against the other.
You know, you write in Genius of Judaism about the moral foundation of the IDF, the moral foundation of the IDF. You must have friends who say to you all the time, the IDF is brutalizing Palestinians. They go into Palestinian homes in the middle of the night and drag Palestinians out of their beds. Israel is seen as a colonialist, imperialist empire, which is in some way brutalizing the Palestinian people. The Gaza war that you covered, in America, day after day, we heard all the casualties in Gaza, while the point was, okay, there were rockets, but no Israelis were dying. What do you say when your friends, or for people you ultimately have to talk about, about this with, make charges against Israel and expect you, as a sensitive, open world person, not to agree with them? You must have dealt with this from time that you've heard these criticisms of Israel. How do you deal with the criticisms?
First of all, I tell them that I will begin to discuss only when they will have expressed sorrow also for the hundreds of thousands of deaths in Syria, in Darfur, and in forgotten wars in Africa. This is the first thing. I don't refuse, but I feel no need to discuss with someone who is narrow mind, who is concentrated, targeting only about the 1,800 deaths. I don't know. I'm sorry, the exact figure of the war, the last war in Gaza. If he does not express at the same time, at least an equal horror and concern For the hundreds thousand dead of the other wars which I was expressing, no need to discuss. He is biased. Is it
anti-Semitism?
His concern is not inhabited and is not the result of a real concern for the people, and he is led by something else, which very often is anti-Semitism. The ground of anti-Semitism today, the way it expresses itself, has something to do with anti-Zionism, and so on. So for me, I don't want to discuss with him. No, really, I often say that. I begin to discuss when I hear the same concern about the 400,000 deaths in Syria, for example, about what happened in Aleppo. I agree to discuss about Gaza. But first of all, do I hear the same sound of revolt about Aleppo? Generally not. Number two, if I have to discuss, which I do sometimes, I would say what I say in the Genius of Judaism, which is that IDF has, of course, as any army in the world, its lost soldiers who commit huge mistakes and sometimes some crimes. As this young soldier who was just condemned by the Israeli tribunal recently for having shot in the head a Palestinian when he was it was not necessary. But as someone who observed this IDF all my life, I was with them so many times. I'm sorry, but this is not it is far from being the rule. I met so many more, and I really say that. I said it in Al Jazeera recently. So many more soldiers of IDF who are still faithful to the purity of weapons of the founder of IDF, who ask themselves so many, even in the middle of the operations, moral questions. They should know, those who want to discuss, that in the army of Israel, you have some lawyers embedded in the battalion, as you have some doctors, as you have some people of telecommunication, you have some lawyers who inside, at the verge of the battle, if not inside, are here to say if the battle which is going to be waged matches or not with the legal issues they are entitled to judge about. I don't know any army in the world which embeds lawyers in order to say if this battle is legal or not. So, of course, there must be some collateral, not damage, crimes, of course, but they are minority, and they cannot overshadow the exceptional behavior in most of the circumstances I had to face and in which I was of the soldiers of IDF. This is a fact. I'm sorry. War is never, I know war enough to know that war is never jolly, is never pretty. War is hideous, always. But in this horror of any war, you have there a democratic army who behaves in a way which should be praised and admired by the armies of the democratic world.
Okay, one more question on this area, and that's the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and why there is no two-state solution. As you and I are meeting right now, and again, this program will be played many times, but as we are taping, is in the aftermath of a UN resolution in the Security Council that condemned Israeli settlements, followed by a speech by Secretary Kerry in which he tried to justify why the United States abstained in that Security Council resolution vote, and therefore the resolution passed. Normally it would have been vetoed by the United States. And one of the things he was claiming was, look, the only way there will be really peace in the Middle East between Israel and the Palestinians is if there's a two-state solution. And what Israel is doing is counterproductive to the future of any two-state solution. I want to know from your perspective, Bernard, why has there been no two-state solution? And how do you react to U.S.-American policy expressed by President Obama and Secretary of State Kerry that basically says the major obstacle, not the only, but the major obstacle, is Israeli settlement policy. How do you feel about this entire issue, and how do you frame for yourself the tragic human conflict that cannot be resolved between Israel and the Palestinians?
One, I have always been a believer, I'm still a believer of the two-state solution. I think it is not dead. It can be revived at any time. And I believe that it is the only fair solution for the area and the only non-suicidal solution for Israel. I still think that. Two, why this two-state solution did not happen? There is responsibility in the two camps, but I don't know how to measure the two responsibilities. But what I know is that in 2000 first, and then in 2000 something, 7 or 8, under the umbrella of Ehud Barak one time, and under the umbrella of Ehud Olmert, there was a real and concrete offer of two-state solution put on the table by Israel. Ehud Olmert did it. Ehud Barak did it. It was refused by the Palestinians without any real discussion. So, without making grocery of responsibilities, at least responsibilities are shared. But what these two examples show is that the responsibility is probably bigger in the refusal of Israel by the Palestinians, in the refusal to condemn the terrorism by the Palestinian Authority, at least by the double language of the Palestinian authorities. On one side, when they speak to the West, they condemn. When they are speaking to their folks, they approve. There was even recently in Ramallah some trees of Christmas with in the trees some photos of martyrs, shaheeds, as they say, who are suicide bombers or stabbers of civilians. So this is a huge responsibility, and you cannot condemn the settlements if you don't condemn with a stronger voice this big responsibility endorsed by the Palestinian Authority since long. On one side, to have been not able to stop or even to condemn the bloodbath, the carnage of Aleppo, and to have let go this resolution, putting on Israel the biggest part of responsibility in the implementing of two-state solution. There is something which is not elegant and which does not look like Barack Obama. Something strange, frankly.
What do you think it's from?
I don't know. He's probably at the point of taking care of his legacy, but this is not a good way of doing it.
Okay. I want you to hear what I feel, and I want you to tell me if this resonates with you or you think I'm off base. I know that there are people in Israel who really would love the West Bank to be part of greater Israel, Judea, Samaria, biblical Israel, Eretz Yisrael. I understand that. But the Israeli people have indicated time and time again that if there were ever a Palestinian state that would live on the border of Israel like Canada lives with America, the overwhelming majority of Israelis, 85% of the Israeli people here have the West Bank. None of that will help you. We'll help you develop it. We'll create, as Shimon Peres said, a confederation between Israel and the Palestinians. We'll have a market to rival the EU and to rival America. But that the Israeli people have been faced with a quagmire where there is in the Palestinian world, sadly, because of an Islamic orientation, which you talk about so often, and again, it's the first time I heard you speak more than a decade ago, of ultimate rejectionism, that ultimately the Palestinian says, I can't share the land with you. Not that I won't. Bernard, I can't share it with you. It would violate who I am and my soul. And therefore, this is not about territory. This is not about a border, not about a settlement. If every settlement were torn down tomorrow, there'd be no peace here. Why? Because it's not about what piece of land each people get. The Palestinian is, at the moment, held hostage by a leadership which is totally committed to a notion that Palestine should be liberated. And when they say Palestine, they don't mean the West Bank. They mean Haifa and Tel Aviv and Jaffa and Netanya and what you and I call Israel proper. And that as long as that is true, it is almost deceptive to suggest, well, both sides haven't been forthcoming enough. It's not about that. You talk about Ehud Olmert. You talk about Ehud Barak. Most American Jews don't even know what Khartoum is. That in 1967, Levi Eshkol says to the Arab League, you can have all the West Bank back. And they say no negotiation, no recognition, no peace. That has been, tragically, the Palestinian Arab jihadist mentality. Not because they're mean, not because they could make peace and don't, because they can't. And first of all, you have a right to say to me, you think I'm totally off base, or I want to hear whether you think whether I am speaking, now I pick up the theme here of your book, there's a truth to what I'm saying.
No, of course, what you say is true. There is a deep rejectionism. When Mahmoud Abbas said that the Jews were not entitled to go on the esplanade of the mosque because they are going to bring some impurity with their impure and dirty feet, what is it except anti-Jew racism and except anti-Semitism, except the idea that the very presence of the Jew in this area is a source of impurity. So this is a deep feeling of majority of Palestinians. And the world don't help them to overcome this feeling. And this would be a target. This will be a task for a democratic administration in France or in America. And I met so often some Palestinians who don't even to express the word of Israel. It does not exist. It should not exist. It is a disorder in the world. The very fact that Israel exists is a sort of insanity in the area. So as long as this will last, as long as this Arab anti-Semitism will not be fought, the problem will be impossible to solve.
I only have a moment with you left, so I'm going to come back to your discussion. In fact, you write here, I will devote, the book is The Genius of Judaism, I will devote the essence of this book to the search for and defense of, I love your language, the search for and the defense of a certain idea of man and of God that you believe is at the heart of the genius of Judaism. You understand, this could be an hour. This is my meat. I love this stuff, okay? You talk about how at one point you show your children, you have two children, this book, and you ask them to comment. And one of your children says to you, after reading your section on God, he says to you, in essence, I don't know what he calls you, Papa, Father, I don't know. Do you believe in God? And you don't really answer him. In fact, I respond that the problem lies elsewhere, you write. In any case, does not present itself in those terms. But then you discuss it in the book, how you feel about the whole question of God and where one relates to God, and how Levinas helps you understand it. By the way, if we had more time, I would want to know from you whether you feel Levinas, who has this obsessive interest in the ethics and philosophy, must in somehow be subordinate to the ethical concern. And he talks about how you get a glimpse of God. He reminds me a little bit, Bernard, of Martin Buber's I Am Thou. And I would want to, if we had more time, I'd want you to talk about whether you see any of I Am Thou in your mentor, Emmanuel Levinas. But then you write, page 223, then you write, no Jew is required to believe in God. You wrote that. And you also talk about how Maimonides makes a distinction between truth and belief. It's about truth in Judaism, not about belief. So my last question, and this sort of brings us to the end. While I would like to spend an hour just on these ideas, I want you to just take a moment, say whatever you want to say about what you've learned out of the Jewish tradition, about how human beings in some way relate to the divine in this universe, and how Judaism does have this unique perspective that you're not required to believe in God, but you are required to what?
You are required to study, you are required to understand, you are required to interrogate, to ask questions, you are required to make the world a better yishuv, better yishuvable, if I dare say. This is the requirement. The question of God, of the belief in God, comes after. Even, that's what I say in this chapter of the book, even when you read Maimonides, you see that the question of the creed arrives much after, logically, after the question of the truth. In the spiral of the knowledge, the creed arrives far after the question of the truth. If you listen to Gaon of Vilnius, one of the biggest thinkers of Jewish modernity, he says in proper terms, if he had to choose, it is not the best choice, but if he had to choose between a stubborn guy, lazy, not working, not studying, but stuck in the contemplation of God on one side, and on the other side, a great studier, a great Talmudist who doubts sometimes about the fullness or the emptiness of the sky, he prefers the second one. He prefers the worker of the intelligence doubting that the lazy one believing. This is Gaon of Vilnius. Again, Chaim de Volozhin, which is another one of my references. The question for Chaim of Volozhin is not the question of belief. The question is the risk of the decreation, of the debuilding of the world. The obsession of Chaim is that the world has been created and could be decreated. And how to do not to have the world decreated. The world to manage with that is to think, is to read, is to study, is to go in yeshiva, is to work in yeshiva. And not only look at the sky in a Christian way. And what I say is that this is probably one of the biggest line dividing the Christian and the Jews. For a Christian, the question is believe and shut up. Not always, but it can be that. Or don't ask question, believe. This is the Pascalian bet, the bet of the French philosopher Blaise Pascal. A bet. You just jump in the emptiness, jump in the void, and hope that you will meet God. This idea of a jump, this idea of a bet, is absolutely unthinkable for a Jew who begins to be a Jew when he is able to go from one branch to the other of the tree of the knowledge, which is the reality of the Talmud. When he is able to unfold the wings of the Spirit, which are unfolded in creation, and that only the Talmud helps to open and to unfold. This is being a Jew, nothing to do with a bet, nothing to do with a jump, and nothing to do with a naive communion with a plain and consistent God. Jewish experience is something completely different, which I expressed in bad, broken English now, but which is better expressed by my grand translator, Stephen Kennedy, in this book. Thank you, Mark.
Oh, no. I love you very much. Sometimes, you know what I'm going to... Sometimes you want to meet somebody, and you meet them and you're disappointed. You transcend, my friend. The only thing is, I know how busy you are. Sometime, come back and sit in that chair. We do part 2. I would love to continue this conversation. You have made an extraordinary contribution to the world in general, and now to the Jewish world. And I thank you so much for this time. Thank you.
We will make a part 2.
Thank you. Thank you. There you have it. Bernard-Henri Lévy, who, in addition to a myriad of accomplishments that have enriched world culture, intellectual thought, the moral conscience of Western civilization, has also written now a marvelous book that should be a part of every home library. The Genius of Judaism, published by Random House. By the way, it's available right now on Amazon, $21. You can have it for your Kindle, $13.99. Or you can have it as an audiobook. Who reads your book? Do you read it?
No.
Somebody else reads it?
Yeah.
Because I love your voice, you know.
It would be impossible. With this terrible English, believe me, would be a bad business for the publisher.
Okay. For $19.60, you can have the Audible book and listen to it as you drive in your car or while you're walking around the house cleaning up. Anyway, I promise you, this is a delicious, courageous, insightful, inspiring, thought-provoking book. It is a gift from Bernard to all of us, The Genius of Judaism, published by Random House. As always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you may have to any of the ideas you heard Bernard express here on this edition of L'Chaim. Please write me, email me, post on our Facebook page, or tweet me. I would love to hear any reactions you have to Bernard-Henri Lévy. Special thanks, by the way, on this edition of L'Chaim to Thane Rosenbaum. Wonderful Thane. Thank you so much for helping to make this edition of L'Chaim possible. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'Chaim, my friends, to life.
L'Chaim is a presentation of Jewish education in media.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.